Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Ask the Experts podcast. So grateful to have each and every one tune in and week out to listen, learn, and grow. Today's episode, we have an incredible guest. And when we want to learn as parents or educators, how we need to learn, how do we need to deal with children's emotional health and well-being, especially when it comes to trauma, how do we respond to such situations? Dr. Gloria Vanderhorst is going to be sharing insights, so you don't want to miss this episode. Dr. Vanderhorst is a psychologist. She has over 50 plus years of experience helping preschoolers and helping them in the areas of trauma, emotional health, and how she has navigated and how parents are, calling Dr. Vanderhorst to help them in those situations. Dr. Vanderhorst has helped families, groups, schools to helping preschoolers. She's also a best-selling author of her books, The Three R's to Change and Read, Reflect, and Respond. Dr. Vanderhorst, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Alka. I'm really excited to be here and to talk with you and to engage your audience as well.
Absolutely. I want to start with, based on your extensive work with preschoolers, what are the most critical emotional needs that go unrecognized in early childhood, especially among trauma affected children?
So, in children in general, let me start there, right? There is a
Yes.
significant difference between the developmental progression for boys and girls. They do not develop at the same rate or in the same way. But we put them together in a preschool as though they are developing in the same way and at the same rate. Right now, our preschools are really designed to accommodate females. And I think the reason for that is that the majority of our preschools are actually run by females.
Mhm.
And
Right.
so it's
Yeah.
just a natural progression, a natural thought that the
Mhm.
way that they organize the classroom, the way that they organize the day is to fit the developmental needs of the little girls,
Right.
not so much the developmental needs of the little boys. And you could look at this even in the physical characteristics of the classroom, right? Classrooms are organized with tables and stations. You will not, well, I know of one preschool in Maryland, but majority of preschools do not have trees in them.
Trace.
And boys like to climb trees.
Right.
In other words, the physical plant itself is not really laid out to accommodate the physical, muscular energy of a preschool boy. The boy needs to move, the boy needs to climb, the boy needs to be active. He's attending, right? But it's not easy for him to sit in the circle. It's easy for the girls to sit in the circle and listen to the story. The boy needs to have his body in motion and
Mhm.
engaged, and he's still listening to the story. But because most of our preschools are staffed and run by women, we don't design the classroom to accommodate the male. The other truth is that boys developmentally lag behind girls in development, in social development. And so we have this expectation that both boys and girls should be in the same place developmentally. It's not possible. They have different pathways. And our preschools have not been able to accommodate those different pathways. And that has then a long-term impact
Mhm.
on the emotional development of the boy.
Right, absolutely. I mean, it's just very interesting, though, as you mentioned, the characteristics.
Mhm.
Boys they like to move. They always like moving around, and it's very hard for them to sit still. So, to the next question, along to what you just alluded to, how does early childhood trauma, in that case, uniquely affect the brain development of of children of preschools,
It
especially affected with trauma?
it definitely is a traumatic
Right.
experience,
Yeah.
right? So we can also kind of back up even into infancy because for boys, there are trauma experiences for boys in infancy that are not present for girls. And the trauma experience is that women, mothers, whether it's the caretaker or the mother, right? Most of our children are still raised by females from infancy to preschool time. There is an increase in the number of fathers that are staying home and raising infants, but the majority are still raised by females. And females do not know that boys come into the world with a broader range of emotional expression than girls do. So when a mother is interacting with her infant
Mhm.
and the boy gets emotionally more intense, let's say on the positive end of the continuum, kind of more excited, more agitated, more active, mother, without realizing what she's doing, is going to have a reaction to that that sends a message to the infant that, oops, I shouldn't go that high. I shouldn't be that intense, right? Maybe
Mhm.
mother just backs up a little bit. Maybe mother's face changes, right?
Right.
Maybe
Yeah.
mother gets really concerned about, why are you getting so hyper up here? It's natural for the boy. Mother doesn't understand that boys do come into the world with a broader range of emotional expression. And so, just unintentionally, mother sends the message that, I'm not comfortable with that range of emotional expression.
Mhm.
Infants are brilliant. Reading emotional context is their survival mechanism, is the only way that they have of taking care of themselves. And so when mother gives that feedback, unintentional feedback, the infant boy narrows his range of expression, right? And he does it to survive.
Mhm.
Now, mother is not really threatening when she does that, oops, I don't like that. But the infant has to take that seriously and has to curtail emotional expression. So from infancy, we are training boys to narrow the range of expression.
Mhm.
And then socially, when they start to walk and talk,
Right.
we make a huge difference between what's acceptable behavior for a boy and what's acceptable behavior for a girl, right? Girls can cry, girls can get agitated, girls can be pissy, if you will, as toddlers. Boys cannot.
I cannot.
We don't
Wow.
let our boys cry.
Hmm.
That's powerful.
That is very powerful. And I guess it kind of stems from, if boys are not allowed to cry, then as they get into adulthood, we find, if if a man does cry at a funeral, for example, then is that where it kind of stems from? That because if a man does cry, he's known as weak.
Yes.
So that's
Yes,
where it would stem from, yes.
we have
Mhm.
associated that with emotional expression for
Right,
the male. He can't really be tender, he can't really be crying, he can't be needy in any way, but that those are human emotions,
right, yeah,
right?
yeah,
They're
uh-huh.
not sexual emotions.
Right,
Those are human emotions, and
uh-huh,
we're born with that range of feeling. And so we rob the male population. And
mm,
we have there's kind of a good reason for it historically. If you go back to being a caveman, I don't want my caveman crying and weeping
right,
about
yeah,
taking his spear and going out and killing something for us to eat.
uh-huh,
But, right? And so in wars, I don't want my man crying and weeping,
uh-huh,
right? I want him
uh-huh.
running towards the front. But, come on. We're not doing that kind of um, social war anymore, right? We're pushing buttons and sending missiles,
Right,
right?
yes,
Flying
mhm,
planes and dropping bombs. So the future for men and women really has to change so that there's a healthier experience for both male and female adults.
absolutely. Could you walk us through, Gloria, the effective or therapeutic approaches you have found when it comes to traumatized preschoolers, and how have they able to manage?
I will tell you that emotionally, preschoolers
Mhm.
are brilliant, right? We don't give them enough credit
Yes.
for the way that they can understand and process trauma. I will give you just one very simple example. I worked with a preschool boy several years ago. Parents were divorced, and they had been divorced since infancy. They had a long-term marriage relationship before they decided to have children. And when they had children, they discovered they had very different approaches to parenting. And so they decided to separate, but to cooperate. And the boy moved back and forth between these two houses a week at
Mhm.
a time,
Mhm.
right? And he was a terror in both houses.
Oh, wow.
A terror, just a 3-year-old who would do tantrums in
Mhm.
each house, who would cause problems, throw things around. He was just like totally unhappy in both houses. So they brought him to me to figure out, well, what's going on with
Right.
this,
Yeah.
right? He is traumatized. There's no doubt about it. That's why he's throwing temper tantrums in both houses. And after doing some sessions of play therapy with him, I thought, okay, we're kind of connected. It's safe enough for me to ask about, you know, what happens for
Right.
you as
Uh-huh.
you move back and forth. And,
Uh-huh.
mom and dad say that you're pretty angry in
Yeah.
both houses,
Uh-huh.
right? And I will say it again, all right? Infants, preschoolers are emotionally brilliant. So this little guy says to me, well, I never cry. I never cry. He says, my tears, I don't let them come out here. I make them go down here. I swallow them. They go into my tummy. They turn into rocks. And then they come right back out my mouth and I throw them all around the room.
Oh,
Now,
wow.
if that isn't the most perfect description of
Mhm.
suppressing emotion,
Right.
right? It's
Yes.
a brilliant description of
Absolutely.
how do you suppress emotion,
Yeah.
right? And so preschoolers who are struggling are emotionally problem solving, right? They are figuring out what do I need to do to communicate to the world around me that I am in distress. And that was his solution, right? Was just to be active and angry and irritated in each household. But when he could actually describe that,
Hmm.
then you could do some work with father, mother, and this preschooler. But you have to trust the fact that preschoolers are emotionally brilliant. They are still in that stage where they have not accepted the cultural dynamic that narrows the range of emotional intelligence, particularly for boys.
Right, right. Exactly. And that's such a great I always find it fascinating, especially when it comes to like, preschoolers, the emotion, like you described, the two parents that were divorced, but also, is there a root cause of like how do we find because and even as they get into teenagers, they can rebel.
Hmm.
I've heard of cases that, children they get into adulthood they get rebellious they get so out of whack even at school they don't pay attention.
Hmm.
Is there a root cause exactly like what happens and how do we identify that so they don't
Curiosity. Yeah,
curiosity yeah. Mhm.
curiosity is the key. All right. We are born emotionally intelligent.
Mhm.
That's our survival mechanism, is to read the room. I tell people if you want to develop a business with a group of people, get a baby. Pass the baby around the room,
Right.
right?
Uh-huh.
In the partner who will be safe and trustworthy, the baby will be happy and cooing. In
Yeah.
the
Uh-huh.
partner that will be risky, the baby will be fidgety and a little bit agitated. In the partner that will ruin your business, the baby will start crying. There's nothing wrong with the baby. The baby doesn't need to be fed. The baby doesn't need to have a diaper change. There is nothing wrong with the baby. The baby has just accurately read the emotional tone of each
Wow.
human being in the room. Babies are brilliant. That's their survival mechanism, right? They survive on emotional intelligence. And what we fail to recognize as we move forward is the emotional intelligence of children can be trusted. We can invest in really understanding and appreciating that emotional intelligence. So if there is a stress in the family and you send that child to school, the child will communicate the stress in the family in their own behavior, right? So if they
Wow.
are poking the person next to them, if they are acting out, they're really trying to say to you, I am not safe, all right? The place that I come from has some element of disquiet or danger to it. And I'm trying to get the world to pay attention. I'm trying to get others to pay attention and to help me problem solve this because something is happening in my family that is not emotionally healthy for me. And so I've got a choice. I either announce this to the world and get
Mhm.
attention, all
Mhm.
right? or I get damaged by this. All
Oh,
right. And
wow.
frequently, our children are being damaged by the distress and the dysfunction in our families of origin. So, children are a wealth of information
Hmm.
on how to intervene and how to heal stressors and traumas that are happening in their families of origin, but we don't tend to give them much credit for that.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yes. What guidelines do you offer to parents and educators?
So I ask parents
Hmm.
to be vigilant, right, about really paying attention to what their children are doing in terms of their behavior and their communication. If you are a parent and you challenge yourself to say, okay, I'm just going to keep track, right? I'm not a professional, but I'm just going to keep track. And
Right.
then you take that log, right, that record to a professional,
Hmm.
they will be able to help you understand what's the dynamic that's happening between you and that child. It's very difficult to see it when you're engaged in the relationship. But if you take that to a professional, the professional is just kind of one step away and can facilitate understanding of what is the dynamic that's happening. And it's true that as parents, right,
Hmm.
our
Hmm.
own histories will jump into the present. So the way we were treated as children will definitely jump into the present and impact the way that we are relating to and treating our own children. So getting help is really a key.
Right, absolutely. What resilience practices do you offer that, or you would recommend to parents when it comes to the emotional health, the emotional strength of children, and who are some of the experts parents can go to?
So self-discovery for any parent is really important, right?
Right.
We all have emotional histories,
Hmm.
all right? They're pieces of trauma that exist for all of us. All right. It could be a big T or it could be a little t, but we all have trauma histories.
Right.
So if we take ourselves seriously and dig into, all right, what is my trauma history? Because I'm bringing that into this family and
Hmm.
I am using it to impact my family. So the recent book that I have published, which is Read, Reflect, Respond, the three R's of growth and change, is
Right.
a journal book to help parents uncover what are their trauma histories?
Oh, wow.
How's their family impacted the way that they function so that they can benefit from their own insights and that will lead them to do a better job of connecting and understanding their own children and facilitating positive growth in their own children.
Right. You mentioned identifying your trauma history, and
Hmm.
I just want to share my trauma history. I know there was a time about good maybe 9, 10 years ago when I would just walk in a room, whether it be family or friends, and they had a baby. The baby would start to cry. And I'm not sure if that was because, I'd gone through a divorce maybe, but, it is so fascinating that a baby
Hmm.
recognizes
Right.
who they want to go to, and the
Hmm.
baby will start to cry. I mean, I'm a female. I got
right?
motherly instincts, but it is so incredible. The baby will just start to cry.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And how did that impact you?
Well, I mean, it impacted me greatly at that time. I mean, I've got two kids, a boy and a girl. But at that time, it just really impacted me greatly because I would start to think, am I less worthy of, you know, becoming a mother? And
Mm,
sometimes, we go through those emotions. Am I worthy
right.
to become a mother? Although, as a female, but not everybody perhaps can be a mother. But that was just me, and it was just so interesting. You mentioned we all
Mm-hmm.
have a trauma history,
We
and we
do.
need to recognize that.
Right. And it's wonderful that you were able to pay attention to
Yes.
that. Some people would just discount it and not notice the pattern,
Mhm.
but you were at the point in your life where you could really pay attention to that pattern. That's incredibly valuable.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And but this has been so incredible. Learning about preschoolers and children in general about their health and well-being, and when they're trauma, when they from a divorced family, and how
Mm.
that greatly impacts them. So, Dr. Vanderhorst, as a best-selling author of your books, Read, Reflect, and 3 R's of Change, how do you balance the critical, empathetic aspects when writing about childhood trauma? Could you share with us?
So it's very important for all of us to understand that each one of us has some form of trauma history. We
Right.
don't escape it,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
There are events that happen to all of us. And as I said, some of them are little T's, right? Maybe I get rejected at school. Maybe people don't want to play with me on the playground. Maybe I miss an opportunity in middle school to be chosen for something that I longed to participate
Mhm.
with, or on the playground, I get chosen last, right? We're choosing teams and
Yeah.
I'm not at the top of the list. So we all have traumas, and appreciating that, understanding those events and the
Mhm.
impact that they have on the way that we feel about ourselves and the way then that we end up relating to others around us
Yeah.
is really critical. So the little T's are powerful and the big T's are powerful, right? We can be abused as children, physically or emotionally,
Mhm.
right? Those are powerful. Those are big T's. And we have to be able to be transparent with those who care for us about the fact that I do have a big T history and I need help with it. We're born connected to another human being,
Mhm.
and the way that we grow and the way that we develop in healthy directions is connection to another
Connection.
human
Yeah.
being
Right.
is critical.
I mean, we can absolutely. I mean, we can never do anything on our own as parents, educators, and even children. They can't be sort of left alone, whether they're at school. Nobody wants to play with them. They're isolated, even at
Mhm.
school, and when they come home,
Yep,
perhaps that's the same dynamics, especially when you come from a dysfunctional
absolutely.
family, when the parents are divorced.
Hmm.
How do we deal with that? What are some of the guidelines that you might offer our viewers if that's the case? The children are isolated at school. Nobody wants to play with them. They don't belong. They don't fit in.
Hmm.
What are some of the guidelines in that aspect you're going to offer the listeners?
Yeah, first, as the adult in this system, you have to take yourself seriously. You cannot offer help to your child who is feeling isolated, rejected, put down,
Mm,
unless you can really identify with that experience and not be triggered yourself.
right,
And I would say, kind of historically, when your child is experiencing these negative experiences and relationships at school, it's probably going to trigger negative experiences that you have had. They may not be the same, right? But it will trigger you. So you have to do two things. It's like the directions on a plane, right? If the plane is in trouble, right, you put your mask on first.
right. Yes.
And
Yeah.
then you put the mask on the child.
Right.
So
Yes.
you have to take care of yourself first. You have to take
Mhm.
yourself seriously, and then you can facilitate growth and healthy development in your child.
Right. Right. Are there any new insights that, when writing your best-selling books, The Three R's to Change and Read, Reflect, and are there any new insights or trends? And I'm always about the trend,
Hmm.
learning about when it comes to the medical aspect, but also, I love to know about trends, and especially in your experience and your expertise, are there any new trends or insights when it comes to trauma-informed care for preschoolers, and do you believe that practitioners are not aware, or how can they become aware of what is happening?
So obviously, one of the ways that I believe, and the reason I wrote this book, that people can be aware is that they do their own work. And many times people do not want to go see a therapist. They think that's way too vulnerable.
Yes.
But,
Mhm.
you can
Right.
start with the book and research some of your own early experiences, some of your own trauma experiences, and get comfortable with the reality that we all have histories. And those histories have traumas in them. They have little t traumas, they have big T traumas, but
Mhm.
it's important that we take those seriously and unlock them and open the door to free those traumas so that you can be available to your child, you can be available to your spouse, you can be available to your family. Traumas lock us up. Little
Mm,
ones, big ones, right? They take a part of us and they lock it up. They box it up in your brain, and that part can no longer be available for relationships. So, unlocking those pieces is really critical. And you can facilitate that through working through a book like Read, Reflect, Respond. You can facilitate that by engaging in therapy or joining a group, right? Where you get the sense of support that you're not the only one in the room who
mhm.
is working through traumas, big
Right.
T's or little t's. But taking yourself seriously and realizing that this is common, it's not unusual. All of us have had traumatic
Yeah.
experiences, and
Mhm.
all of us can do the work and the research to heal from those experiences. And we benefit, everyone in relationship to us benefits when we do that healing work.
Right. And being a part of a group is always, really benefits.
Hmm.
You work with groups, families, individuals, schools. I
Hmm.
think a group setting, just like, the AA, Alcoholic Anonymous, you're in
Right?
a part of a group. You're not alone. And
Mhm.
I think when you feel you're alone, that's when perhaps you don't heal, you don't
Right,
improve, right?
right.
But when
Right.
you're part of a group, everyone is there to support. You're there. So I think
Mhm.
that's one of the best. I love being part of a group. And, as we said, no one is meant to do anything alone.
Right. Yes, we're born connected. We need to
Mhm.
stay in connection. We don't have to have a ton of connections in order to be
No.
emotionally healthy,
Right.
but
Yeah.
we have to be in relationship with others. And that relationship has to support us, benefit us, understand us, and help us to be transparent and critical of ourselves so that we can be honest about what are the early trauma experiences, what are some of the big T's and little T's
Mhm.
that impact us, and that we're all capable of healing. Nobody has to carry that forward.
Right. And even as adults, you mentioned, we need to be real. We need to acknowledge and
Mhm.
take ourselves seriously. Because when we take ourselves seriously as parents or educators, we are able to help our children,
Right.
and what they are going through. And I'm just going to go off tangent a little bit. And I'm going to talk about, because it relates to the same thing, trauma. I know when I went through a traumatic divorce, it was, that part of me took time to heal. But I had
Absolutely.
to, but I had to give myself permission. I
Hmm.
had to be the one to really acknowledge that, yes, I'm going through divorce, but divorce is everyone goes through this difficult emotional time. I'm not the only one. But when I
Right.
began to realize, and also what really helped me was the book. And I wish I had your book at that time, The Three Hours to Change. The book that I read at that time was Feelings Buried Alive. Yeah, Feelings Buried Alive Never Die.
Mm-hmm.
And
Hmm.
I loved that. It was so impactful and so life-changing. And from that moment on, but I think what I'm trying to also get to the point is that we have to acknowledge ourselves, which you perfectly said.
Correct. Correct. Right. So we all have trauma. You really have to be able to put that up front.
Yeah.
So often people will say, I don't want to talk about it.
Yes. Mm.
Right. I don't
Yeah.
want to talk about that's in the past. I'm not going into the past. Right. But what you don't realize is the past jumps into the present.
Yeah.
It always does. It always will, unless you can turn and greet the past,
Right.
right? And interact with the past and really understand what that part of you was doing, what was happening at that age, what was happening in that place, what were the feelings that you were experiencing, and facilitate a relationship between the past and the present. Then you can heal. But if you're
Mm.
just going to ignore the past and say,
Hmm.
that's in the past, I'm not talking about it, not visiting it, not going there anymore, you can't heal. It is like having weights on you, right? And you're
Hmm.
in the ocean, and those weights are going to pull you down
Yes.
underwater unless
Right.
you can release them. So it's very important to take yourself seriously and be curious and interested in healing those injuries from the past.
Absolutely. And I can relate to that. Yes, it kind of felt heavy when I didn't want to talk about my past, but
Right?
when I began to acknowledge, and it felt amazing.
Mhm.
Dr. Vanderhorst, I'm very curious to know as to, you mentioned parents need to take, the children, they have to seek a therapist, they have to seek
Mhm.
a psychologist, or why do, so that curiosity part of me has just come in and I want to ask, because I'm very curious to know when you are seeking a psychologist, whether it's a preschooler or a teenager, why
Mhm.
do they always ask about the past? Like, explain to me when you were 3 years of age.
Hmm.
What happened? How did it feel like? And so I'm curious to know, why do they always go back to the past?
All right, because our brain holds on to everything.
Mm.
And our brain even holds on to experiences in the last trimester before birth.
Oh, wow.
So you have a history that goes prior to birth, and your brain is a marvelous, just incredibly marvelous, because it truly does hold on to every experience you have ever had. All right. There are so many folds and cells and places to
Mm.
hide these things in
Right.
your, and it really is like a huge storage locker. All right. And some of your experiences are in paper bags, so you can find them easily.
Uh-huh.
Some of your experiences are in boxes, cardboard boxes, a little
Uh-huh.
harder to get to. And some of your experiences are in locked cabinets,
Oh, wow.
right? With very thick walls,
Uh-huh.
difficult to get to, but so important to unlock because
Right.
it releases whatever the trauma or the tension was for you at that time and allows you to heal from that injury. We all get injured. There's no way to avoid it,
Uh-huh.
but we can also find that injury and take care of ourselves and comfort ourselves and heal from that injury and seek support for that injury, all right? Or seek honest repair for that injury. So our brains are just huge storage lockers, and it's powerful for you to
Powerful.
be
Yeah.
able to walk through and open up these pieces of your history and see the freedom that comes, the health that
Uh-huh.
comes as a result, because we know that our mental injuries also affect our physical bodies. So there can be physical healing that happens from unlocking the mental injuries.
Right. No, that is so interesting. Yeah, your mind is very powerful in how, and even as we get older, we remember from the past what's happened in
Right.
the past.
Hmm.
And so it's just very, very interesting how our mind, and it's just a very powerful tool. So how do preschoolers respond differently in those settings where the emotional healing or the trauma recovery? How do preschoolers, do they all respond the same
Yeah.
way, or is it
Oh
different?
no. So preschoolers are going to respond much more from their body,
Right.
right, than their language, all right, because their early experiences are
Mm.
really stored in terms of body action. That's why when you're working with a preschooler, you're not just going to sit and talk. All right, you're going to do lots of action, lots of play. You're going to
Uh-huh.
jump around the room. You're going to crawl under couches. I mean, you have to be pretty agile to work with a preschooler.
Right. Yeah.
You're going to use tons of objects. All
Mhm.
right. I don't know if you're familiar with the sand tray process, but it is a
I've seen it.
process,
Yes.
yeah, where you have a big tray of sand and lots of different objects
Hmm.
that can be placed in the sand. I remember working with another little boy who had struggles at home, and he would come in and he would take family characters. All right. They weren't always mother, father, child. Sometimes they were uh, Superman, right?
Right. Yeah.
Superwoman, just any kind of objects or dolls. And he would bury them in the sand.
Oh, wow. Oh,
Absolutely every time, right? So he would get rid of his entire family. Every time he would just get rid of his entire family. All right. So when I'm experiencing that, right, what I am seeing is that his family is dangerous for him.
Oh, wow.
Why else would you bury your family,
How
right?
old was he?
Four,
Oh, wow.
right?
Such a young
So
age.
they have to be dangerous for you. So my job is to figure out what's the danger, what's happening in that
Mm,
family, all right, that he feels so disconnected, so isolated, so threatened by them that they all have to go underground, all right?
oh,
So
wow. That's incredible. So
it's
sad. I know.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I've heard of cases where, when a child does experience, he could be an only child. I'm not sure if he was an only child, but I can only imagine if that was the case and how dangerous if he kind of felt the parents or the family in general, they were danger.
Danger.
They could be like spanking him. They could be like some parents I've heard of, they can be so aggressive with their children, and that I mean, that hurts me. When
Yeah,
when
it's
I
hard.
hear of cases like that,
Hmm.
maybe that's what he's experiencing, maybe
Hmm.
why that they're dangerous.
Right, right. And it's very important, right, for us to take children seriously.
Mm,
Children will report the concerns that they have emotionally. You have to be able to pay attention to that report and take it seriously. That, as I said, children are emotionally brilliant. As we get older,
mhm.
we learn to discount or distort that natural brilliance because we get told that what we think is happening, what we experience happening, is not really true. They
Mm,
didn't mean to hurt you,
right.
right?
Yeah.
Right?
Hmm.
They weren't really intentionally making fun of you, and on and on and on. So
Yeah.
we get told to discount our own emotional
Yeah.
experiences.
Yeah. Hmm. Absolutely. Dr. Vanderhorst, this has been such a powerful conversation. And, ladies and gentlemen, listen to the conversation as to what is happening. Acknowledge your children, acknowledge their health and the well-being. Dr. Vanderhorst, where can people connect with you?
I would love to connect with everyone who is listening, and the easiest way to do that is through my website. And my website is www.drvanderhorst.com. So it's www.drvanderhorst.com. You can go there, you can send me a message, you can watch some of the videos about the different approaches to therapy. You can order a copy of Read, Reflect, Respond from that website. And I have all kinds of pieces of information about therapy and healing that will be helpful to you.
Absolutely. And we'll make sure we put it in the show notes.
Thank you.
Your best-selling books. Absolutely. But Dr. Vanderhorst, thank you so much for sharing valuable insights on emotional health and trauma. And you have worked with individual schools and groups, and in your expertise, it really has been absolutely just incredible. And
Thank you.
parents and educators alike, you have empowered them. For everyone listening, please go check out Dr. Vanderhorst. Go to her website, get her book. Her best-selling books are available on Amazon. Until next time, stay tuned for Ask the Experts podcast. If you enjoyed the conversation with Dr. Vanderhorst, like and subscribe to our channel. Until next time, bye-bye for now. Thank you so much, Dr. Vanderhorst. It's
Thank
been
you.
incredible.